And so the very first bullet point, as you see, is awareness. So there's just so many different levels of awareness, but I broke it down to 3 pinpoints that you want to pay attention to in order to properly discover how to influence and persuade that individual that you're talking to. And I broke that down to listen, mirror, and guide. So listen is one of the key things in an actual sales conversation that you need to do in order to identify what it is that influences the person. You see, I think that sometimes salesmen, and I used to do this all the time, so if you're doing it right now, don't worry about it. At least now you know how to fix it. And when you listen, you actually are listening to the prospect tell you how to sell them. Weird, right? And when we go into a sales conversation, sometimes we're trained to overtalk because we want to, let's say, go through this particular process that you have to do your 5-minute pitch, like why you're number one, why you're the best, and what your company is and what your company is about. And for those of you who have not yet downloaded a copy of my sales script, you'll find on that sales script, and for those of you who have a copy of it, you'll find that there is no tap dancing involved. If anything, it's more empathetic to the consumer. And this script applies to anything. It applies to outbounds, inbounds, aggregate leads, general inquiries, people that come into you in person. And the momentum of the conversation is driven in a way where you are guiding that individual, but you can't necessarily guide them and keep their attention to influence them to move forward unless you understand and listen to what exactly their needs are. But it's not just listening to what their goals are. It's not just listening to what their needs are. It's actually listening to how they respond to certain things. And so the reason why I put mirror is because we come across different type of characteristics in sales. Characters that we engage with are these prospects, right? So some of the prospects that we engage with, you'll hear through the tonality of their voice that they're in a rush or that they're trying to speak fast. You know what I mean? Like you caught them off guard. This is typically done or happens when you speak with an aggregate lead because they weren't expecting the phone call to begin with. So how do you handle that, right? But then again, you also come across prospects who are taking their time. They're speaking a little bit more methodically. They're focused on you. And you're gonna notice that the tonality between the two are different, but it is important that you match it. And you can't match it if you're just doing all the talking because you're not listening to how they're talking and the words that they're saying. So mirroring actually comes into play because you're mirroring their tone. So if you have an aggregate lead and they get connected to you and they're more caught off by surprise, but they're talking to you in a rush because you caught them in a bad situation, maybe they're in a time constraint, maybe they're at work, it's important that you actually mirror their tonality. So if they're talking real fast just like this and they're trying to get you off the phone, you can't necessarily approach them in a monotone and just kind of slow type of pace where you want to be on a completely different energy level than them. Does that make sense? So because subconsciously, when you match their tone or you mirror their tone, you're showing them that you're like them. You're showing them that you're on the same level as them. And that is very important because that subconsciously demonstrates that they should like you. And that's how you build rapport. It's not necessarily spending an hour on the phone hoping that you could wear them out and hoping that they don't go and talk to someone else for another hour. I know that that's kind of the method or the strategy behind a lot of loan officers today. And I think that ultimately is gonna leave you with this resentment because you felt like you spent so much time with this particular prospect that they should give you the business and you're just appalled if they shopped you or went to a different company. So instead, try to achieve it by simply mirroring their tonality.